Warning, this episode contains mild spoilers for Made in Abyss and Seven Deadly Sins, and even a little bit of math. I recently watched Planetarian, and there are many aspects of the show that I could praise. The characters act realistically, they build an endearing friendship over the course of 5 short episodes, and its ability to pull on your heartstrings is powerful enough to make a grown man cry. One aspect that I found particularly interesting and somewhat unique about this show was its willingness to let each episode play for exactly as long as it needed to play out. The result was a show that doesn't waste a minute, and despite the fact that with a normal show we would have gotten 22 minutes every episode, no one complains about the show having less content. The reason for that is quite clear. We value quality over quantity. Why is it then that the vast majority of anime still has 22-minute episodes? Unfortunately, most anime is made for television, meaning that it needs to fit a specific time slot. But there's no denying that abandoning that rubric when anime have done it in the past has had positive effects on the quality of the shows that have chosen to do so. As such, I wish this quality was one we'd see more often in anime. Planetarian trusts the viewer to understand things that should be reasonably obvious, and doesn't feel the need to waste time explaining them. It also leaves out details that aren't necessary to the story it's telling. If it wanted to, Planetarian could reach 22 minutes on every episode by shoving in information dumps or heavy narration, describing and explaining details about the universe that we don't really care about or need to know to feel the effect that the artwork is going for. It could spend more time talking about the collapse of society, or show a flashback of Yumemi's human coworkers deciding to lie to her about the fate of their department store, or it could add narration to explain Yumemi's loneliness. The show has plenty of options for filler, but Planetarian makes use of its unique position. It premiered on the internet rather than on television, so it didn't have the same burden to fill the 22-minute time slot that TV anime usually do. However, breaking from the chains that are the 22-minute time slot isn't something that we've only seen from internet-exclusive shows either. Made in Abyss accomplished a similar feat. However, rather than shortening most of its episodes, its season finale doubled its slot, giving it a full 48 minutes to wrap up the arc. This is particularly useful for a show like Made in Abyss, which is an adaptation of an ongoing manga. This type of show has the best opportunity to utilize its time properly, because the manga will always have more content than a show could possibly cover in a single season by the time they get adapted to the anime. Made in Abyss in particular is a show that does successfully avoid filler relatively well in comparison to most TV anime. Now imagine how it would have impacted the show if the finale wasn't an hour long. They would have had to either A, end the season on a cliffhanger where Reg would still be trying to decide whether he would fulfill Nanachi's request and Riko would still be unconscious, or B, cut out content earlier in the show to make more time to reach the same point in the story by the end of the season. Both options are less than ideal. The first option preserves most of the show, allowing them to show all of the same content up to the season finale, which would suffer in terms of the quality of the conclusion. The second option preserves the satisfaction of finishing the arc, but sacrifices and cuts short content wherever it can. As a result of the decision to give the final episode 26 extra minutes, we ended up with a show that has a satisfying conclusion to the final arc of the season without needing to sacrifice any other content. These shows both understand how much time they needed to achieve what they wanted to achieve, and they both took as much time as they needed. But this practice wouldn't be so praiseworthy if most shows didn't completely screw this up. Seven Deadly Sins is a show that was in the same spot as Made in Abyss, but it doesn't aspire to be anything more than a 24-episode show at 22 minutes an episode. Given that anime adaptations of ongoing manga have a lot of content to work with, they ideally don't have to be hindered by their time slot, because they have the freedom to go at whatever pace suits them, and they don't have to worry about running out of content. Now I know I'm about to sound like Hoodie and insult a series that I claim to like, but I consider myself a fan of the Seven Deadly Sins manga. The semi-recent fight between Escanor and Estarossa was one of the most hype moments in the entire series, because they're two of the coolest characters in the series. That said, the anime adaptation makes me cringe. While Planetarian had impeccably concise pacing, the Seven Deadly Sins anime has very inconsistent pacing. Some episodes cover as much content as 8 chapters of the manga, while some only cover 3. The effect is that some episodes felt too fast, while others slowed to a crawl. It almost seems like they couldn't find a very good place to end Season 1 before the defeat of Hendrickson, because despite the fact that at the time of the anime's release, it covered 108 chapters out of the 119 that existed, it made no effort to cover less content to let the manga get out ahead of it. Seriously, that's 11 chapters. When was the last time an anime adaptation got that close to catching up to the manga? Bleach? Well, that's a good sign. I shudder to think how much content must have got cut from the anime adaptation to achieve this strange goal. The only way to tell for sure would be to rewatch the anime while also rereading the manga. In case you're wondering where I'm getting these numbers from, I'll tell you so you can check yourself. The Seven Deadly Sins wiki has a page for every chapter of the manga, and each page tells you when the chapter was originally released. They also have a page for every episode of the anime, which tells you which chapters of the manga each episode adapts. I cross-reference that with the release dates of each episode to figure out where the manga was when the anime finished the first season. And again, I did watch and read all of Seven Deadly Sins.
And I didn't, but Zero's audio cuts out here, and he's already back in college, footage and can't record, so I, Hoodie, am here to finish the video. So how does Made in Abyss compare to 7 Deadly Sins in terms of how much content the first season covered? Well, 7 Deadly Sins covered 108 chapters and 24 episodes, while Made in Abyss covered 26 chapters and 13 episodes. For the record, in 13 episodes, 7 Deadly Sins covered the first 60 chapters of the manga. Also, let's not forget the 13th episode of Made in Abyss is twice as long as a normal episode, so it's clear that 7 Deadly Sins is using a lot less time to cover the same number of chapters that Made in Abyss is covering. Some of that will be due to differences in pacing of the original mangas in question, but that consideration isn't nearly enough to compensate for the huge disparity in the number of chapters both shows cover. Made in Abyss took extra time to reach the point in the story that it wanted to reach for the end of the first season, while 7 Deadly Sins shot through the volumes of content as fast as it could to wrap up the Hendrickson arc in the first season of the show, while taking a conventional amount of time for a single season of a show. The result was that 11 chapter difference between the end of season 1 and the point the manga had reached by the time it was released for 7 Deadly Sins, while the Made in Abyss manga had a 16 chapter difference. That doesn't seem like much, but when you consider that it only needed 26 for the first season, it's much closer to being able to cover as much of the manga the next season than SDS was. And while I'm here, since I'm hijacking Zero's video, let me use this opportunity to talk about Haikyuu. If you watch the show, then you're aware of the fact that seasons 1 and 2 are both 25 episodes long, meanwhile season 3 is only 10 episodes. Haikyuu's anime came out really fast. Too fast in comparison to how much manga material is out already. The first season covers roughly from issue 1 to 70, and then the second season covers about 71 to 149. At around 70 issues a season, it simply was not feasible for the show to come out at its current rate and maintain that formula. For a lot of shows, this is where filler starts to come in, like what Zero mentioned earlier. They need to fit a certain model, and to do so, they just throw in stuff that doesn't really need to be there. There's almost no debate that this produces an inferior product. Haikyuu's decision to break that mold and drop from 25 episodes to 10, thus only covering 40 chapters, saved that match. And yes, unfortunately that means we got less of this hype anime, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. So, we have Planetarian, which takes less time than a standard show with the same number of episodes would to improve its pacing, Made in Abyss, which takes more time than a standard show would to improve its pacing, and 7 Deadly Sins, which took as much time as a standard show would and had bad pacing due to trying to cram too much content into too short of a time frame. Ultimately, it would be impossible for every anime coming out today to be internet exclusive and not have to worry about how long each episode is, because television is still the main medium for anime, but there's something to be said about allowing art to break the mold. Perhaps in the future, as the internet grows more and more ingrained into our culture, more shows will be produced with the intention of premiering online, and we'll be able to make bold decisions like this to ensure the quality of their stories remains intact. Part of the journey to that future, however, will be recognizing and celebrating these shows that manage their time in unique ways to strengthen their narratives.